What is going on, everybody? Tyler Brandt back here with another video, another Sunday, another Patriots football Sunday. A beautiful Sunday for the Patriots to win a game of football and get back in the division. It seems like it's been forever since the Patriots won a game. It's been a very frustrating week. And it's time to move on, and it's time to look at the San Francisco 49ers versus the New England Patriots. San Francisco comes into this game at 3-3, and they travel to New England, and New England, of course, 2-3 in third place in the AFC East for the first time in what feels like forever. But this is a very important game for New England. It's must-win territory at this point. From here, pretty much every week out for New England, especially with the AFC looking as good as they do, with Tennessee looking great, Pittsburgh looking great, Cleveland's at this point 4-2, Baltimore, Kansas City. There's a lot of very good teams in the AFC. So if the Patriots want to make one of those final 7 playoff spots, they're going to have to start winning games, and it starts this week versus the San Francisco 49ers. Now, before we get into some of the stuff that we're watching for in this game, David Andrews is back off of IR. I think that's a huge return for the New England Patriots offensive line. And beyond that, on San Francisco's side of the ball, of course, if you don't know already, no Richard Sherman, no Dee Ford, no Nick Bosa, excuse me. So they're missing some very big pieces on that defense. But they're not any slouch by any stretch of the imagination. So, without any further ado, let's break down the New England Patriots and the San Francisco 49ers. Again, like I just said, San Francisco missing some guys, but their defense really not a slouch, at least not right now. They're 7th in the NFL in DVOA in terms of their rushing defense, and that is something that the New England Patriots offense is going to have to exploit to stay in this game. At this point, the Patriots are a run-first offense, in my opinion. The passing game has been wildly inconsistent through the first 5 weeks or so. But basically, to break down San Francisco's run game, they run more of a 4-3 hybrid running defense. And while it is very good against the run, there are opportunities to exploit that defense. And I think New England will do that by kind of their most comfortable way of running the ball, putting a fullback out there, lead block into the weak side of the defense, and then a lot of counter runs, pulling guards to get to the weak side, to get bodies in front of the running back, especially, again, on that weak side, so they can find running lanes and exploit and get some big gains and some consistent gains, which they did run over 100 yards against Denver, but it was really with no consistency, and most of those running yards came on Cam Newton's big scramble at the end of the game. So I think we need to see a more consistent rush. Again, in San Francisco's 4-3 hybrid rush defense, there will be opportunities for New England to move the ball. They just have to do it consistently on the ground in this game. Beyond just the running backs running the ball, they also are susceptible to a few read action and option plays from the quarterback. Daniel Jones in the Giants game had a couple big runs, and he was able to rip them off against that Niners defense. So I think a heavy dose of Damian Harris, who's looked very good when he's had some opportunities. Maybe a little bit of Rex Burkhead. Sony Michel, I don't believe will play. He may be a game-time decision. So the personnel is there. They should be able to run the ball. I think we'll see Cam Newton get out a little bit. Last week, I harped on him just standing in the pocket and being a statue. And while I'm not an advocate for him running the ball 100 times a game, he needs to move. He needs to get his feet running. He needs to get off and going. That's, I think, where he feels more comfortable, when he can just be himself and move around in the pocket and all that kind of stuff. So I think we see Cam Newton run a little bit more designated runs and design runs to Cam Newton, and hopefully another heavy dose of Damian Harris. That's the guy that I really want to see take the next step. He's looked very good in opportunities, and he should, again, have opportunities against this San Francisco 4-3 hybrid defense. Now, from my understanding, in terms of the San Francisco passing defense, they operate in a lot of ways like the Seattle defense does. Maybe some different names for different things, but they operate primarily out of a zone scheme, which is very good for New England because Cam and Josh McDaniels have been very good together when throwing against zone coverage as opposed to man coverage. But they use a lot of variations of cover 3 zones, and that's kind of what New England saw in Seattle, whether it was cover 3 or quarters defense, and it was a lot of zone, and they were really able to move the ball. So I would hope to see the next step in Cam Newton's progression as a Patriot this week. Again, I think he'll be able to throw the ball a little bit more comfortably this week than opposed to last week versus Denver. And not to mention, having a regular full week of practice doesn't hurt anybody either. As we know, the Patriots haven't had a regular week in about 2 or 3 weeks. So you couple that with hopefully a weakness that the Patriots should be able to exploit through the air, and all of a sudden you can kind of see where this Patriot attack starts to come from this week. So when the 49ers are not playing their cover 3 quarters defense, especially in the zone, they go to a cover 1 man defense, and that is where they may be able to exploit New England. We saw Cam Newton, he was very bad against man defense, and he's been very bad against man defense and very bad against the blitz. So I would expect San Francisco to bring pressure a lot. I would expect them to, every big down, whenever they need a big stop, move into a cover 1 man, maybe even some cover 0 stuff, and just send guys at Cam Newton. That was a glaring issue last week against Denver. And beyond just him, I think the wide receivers need to do a little bit more on their part to get a little bit of separation. Last week, I may have been a little bit hard on Cam. I put a lot of that game on him, which I still believe. But it's not just him. The wide receivers have to start to separate. It's really true. And other than Damiere Byrd, who I'll leave out of this, because Damiere Byrd has been very good. Cam has just missed him from time to time, but he has been a very good, a very bright spot for this New England wide receiver group. There hasn't been anybody that's taken the next step up. Jules, if anything, he's where he was last year, of not taking a step back. That could be because injury, that could be because of age. N'Keal Harry, he's getting open, but not with any consistency. And they're not doing anything to really help Cam other than Damiere Byrd. So I would like to see, this week, the Patriots receivers really find holes in the coverage, especially in zone coverage, which Josh McDaniels will help them do. Hopefully this week we see Devin Asiasi. Ryan Izzo was an absolute mess last week. He fumbled that ball on the biggest play of the Patriots offense on the day. So I'm hopefully we see a little bit of Devin Asiasi this week, but the wide receivers need to start separating and finding holes in zones and separating from man coverage, because while Cam hasn't been great and he wasn't great last week, it doesn't make it any easier when the wide receivers aren't helping him really at all. And again, San Francisco's defense may be lacking star power, but they're still good. They still have good personnel. Jason Verrett is someone who's been around the league. He's been hurt, but when he is healthy, he's very good. He's healthy now. He's having a very good season. He's been one of the best defensive backs in football. And, Javon Kinlaw is no slouch. Eric Armstead on the defensive line is no slouch. So they still have some very good defensive players there, and that defense is still pretty damn good. So I expect to see New England, mix in, again, some of the running plays. They have to get the running game going on the weak side of the 4-3 defense. In the zone coverage that San Francisco will throw, guys got to find holes in zones. Hopefully in man coverage, we'll start to see people separate, people that aren't Damiere Byrd, really. And I would like to see, and I expect to see New England kind of mimic a lot of what Miami did with Brian Flores, with, getting crossers open up high, down low, attacking the middle of the field, especially in that zone coverage. I think they'll be able to do that. So they should be able to move the ball. I think they could scheme guys open. It's just at this point execution on the offensive end, which when you see the big mismatch this week, they're going to need to execute on offense to stay in this game. Now, let's go to the other side of the ball, and let's talk about that very bad mismatch for the New England Patriots, and that is the San Francisco running game versus the Patriots' regular personnel at this point this season. And it's a big mismatch. I mean, when you really look at it, San Francisco likes to run the ball out of heavy sets, rightfully so. George Kittle is the best blocking tight end in football, not Travis Kelce. George Kittle is the best blocking tight end in football. Kyle Juszczyk is the best fullback in football, and again, they use him as an offensive weapon, as both a blocker and a runner. He's fantastic as well. So they like to run the ball out of these heavy sets, which for New England, a group of guys that like to run dime and nickel defense and have extra defensive backs on the field, that presents a huge problem. Essentially, New England is going to have to depend on Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar, John Jones, Terrence Brooks. They're going to depend on those guys, especially with no Josh Uche this week. They're going to depend on them to stop the run. They're undersized with what San Francisco likes to get in that heavy set running game. And they like to run a lot of outside zone runs. They average 5.2 yards per carry on those zone runs. And if you give them that outside edge and they're able to set the edge on their end and get guys running downhill, it's going to be a very long day. We've seen Kyle Shanahan, when this run works, they don't feel any pressure to throw the ball. And he does it, and that's what makes him so great. I mean, that's what he does. He takes the ball out of Jimmy's hands if he has to, and he's going to run the ball. If it works, he's going to run it all game. And Jimmy's not there to throw for 500 yards. He's there to make sure the game doesn't get out of hand. And if they can run the ball and take the ball out of Jimmy Garoppolo's hands, all of a sudden San Francisco is playing the game that they want to play. to build on that running game. Once it does start going downhill and they start to get that outside run going and they're averaging all these yards against you, that's when they build the play action passing game off of that. And a lot of that schemes guys like Deebo Samuel to get the ball in space, Brandon Ayuk to get the ball in space, and of course their superstar tight end, George Kittle. It all starts with the run, and they build off of the run. So it is imperative that the New England Patriots start and stop the run, and that's where they start the game plan this week. With that being said, if you can stop the run and you can force San Francisco to, let's say, be more traditional against the defense, all of a sudden, all the momentum, I think, swings back into the favor of the New England Patriots. If you can get Jimmy to have to throw the ball traditionally, we saw Miami able to do that a lot when they played Miami this year. All of a sudden, Jimmy gets frazzled and it's just not good. So if you could stop the run and force Jimmy to beat you with his arm, all of a sudden the Patriots will have a pretty big advantage. I think we could see a lot of the same coverage defensively, especially down on the line of scrimmage, that we saw in Super Bowl 53 against the Rams. I believe it was 53 against the Rams, yes. So it's a lot of that 6-1, 5-2 kind of coverage where they spread guys out along the line of scrimmage and you force that outside run back inside, and that's where, you know, Lawrence Guy and Bo Allen and stuff like that will be in there to stuff the run, and that ideally that would work for New England if they can funnel guys back into the interior defensive line, which has been pretty good for New England. So if they run that 6-1 coverage, they funnel guys back inside, and all of a sudden you make Jimmy beat you, again, the Patriots have that big advantage, especially if they're able to take away the middle of the field, which they can do. We've seen them do in the past. You take away the middle of the field, especially in the passing game, you make Jimmy beat you down the sidelines, and I'll take, you know, J.C. Jackson and Stephen Gilmore over Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk on the outside any day of the week. So if you can funnel that run back inside, make Jimmy beat you on the sidelines, all of a sudden the Patriots have a ton of momentum on defense, and they may be looking at 3-3 back into second place in this division. Some things I am watching for in this game. First, I am looking forward to what I think is going to be the Jason Verrett and Damiere Byrd matchup. Damiere Byrd's been the best wide receiver for New England. Jason Verrett has had a very good season as a San Francisco 49ers defensive back. Now, do I think that'll equate to Damiere Byrd having a huge day? Not necessarily, because they're not getting the ball to Damiere Byrd nearly as much as they need to, but I think it'll be a good, intriguing matchup to watch. He's been able to separate from a lot of the better defensive backs that he's played this season, and I expect him to do the same, so I'm excited for Damiere Byrd and Jason Verrett. The next thing I am watching for in this game is how the Patriots take George Kittle out of the game, or what impact George Kittle has on the game. The Patriots have taken out big tight ends before. They've taken out Travis Kelce, Darren Waller. They missed Noah Fant last week, thank goodness, I guess, even though they lost anyway. But I'm very intrigued to see. I think they'll be able to take him as a pass catcher out of the game. We've seen them do it before, again. But I think he has more of an impact than just as a pass catcher. So while I think Shanahan can scheme him the ball in space, I'm very intrigued to see how, you know, he impacts the game as a blocker and the things he's able to do in the run game if New England is able to minimize that impact that he has on the game that way. And finally, I'm excited to see the Patriots offensive line with David Andrews back under center. Well, at center, I should say. David Andrews being back really, I think, settles down this offensive line. Joe Thuney can slide back to left guard where he is excellent. Michael Onwenu, again, has been excellent. He'll slide back to his natural position. I would assume Isaiah Wynn would then slide back to left tackle. And all of a sudden, this Patriots offensive line is looking like the force they were to start the season, which will help Cam Newton and will help the entire offense. We saw glimpses of good offensive line play against Denver, but there was also some very bad offensive line play. And that erratic offensive line really starts with David Andrews not being there. He's the captain of that line. He knows how to get everybody in the right formation and get everybody on the line. He's a very, very good center, and he's very, very, very big and very important to what this New England team does. So I'm happy to have him back, and I'm happy to see this offensive line against a good defensive line in San Francisco this week. So let's wrap this up. I'll give you what Vegas thinks of the game, my final prediction, and you can go watch some Patriots football. So Vegas has the Patriots as a 3-point favorite in this game as far as I could see. Very interesting that they're the favorite in this game, especially as they're the team that's coming off a loss, and San Francisco beat the Rams last week. So, New England, again, a 3-point favorite. The money line is New England minus 165, and the over-under is set this week at 45. Again, over-under, this might be a week that I hammer the under and try to get a little money that way. So, without any further ado, my final score prediction for the New England Patriots and the San Francisco 49ers. I have the New England Patriots winning this game 23-17. I think, honestly, Bill Belichick being Jimmy Garoppolo's head coach gives him a little bit more of an advantage than any other kind of a team going against San Francisco. Both teams have a lot of injuries, but San Francisco's losing a lot of star power. New England having finally a regular week of practice helps this team so much. They're finally, hopefully, out of the spotlight with COVID, and it's left this locker room, and they can finally start to get to somewhat normal. And they've only been interrupted for 2 or 3 weeks, and it's not a whole season thing. So I think them having a normal week of practice helps. Them, Bill Belichick being Jimmy Garoppolo's old head coach helps. I think it's a low-scoring game. I think they're able to somewhat slow down San Francisco's run game a little bit. I still think they'll probably run a good chunk and for very well. But when they need to stop the run, they will. And I think the Patriots just do enough to win this game. Again, final score, 23-17. The Patriots move to 3-3. They're back in second place in the AFC East behind a Bills team that has looked good, but not at that elite level that we thought or everybody else thought they were. So it's still a dogfight in this division, and New England gets right back in it with a win against San Francisco this week. That is going to do it for this video. Leave it down in the comments below your predictions for the game, your score predictions, everything else. Get at me in the comments down below. What do you think is going to happen? Once again, I'm Tyler Brandt. Follow me on Twitter at the Tyler Brandt, on Instagram at Talking Pats. I'll be live tweeting the game, the Patriot game, all day on Twitter, so we can chat it up on there while the game is happening. Definitely get at me there. Until the post-game show, until next time, I'm Tyler Brandt. Be safe, be good, and I'll catch you next time.